Hi, you're watching Green Couch Conversations, and I'm your host, Tiffany Bayman. Today we're going to be talking about Black History Month, the significance of HBCUs and the Divine Nine, and ways that ERGs foster an inclusive workplace environment. But before we get started, I want to introduce you to the panelists that are with us today on the Green Couch. So let's start with Gina McCrae.
Hello, everybody. My name is Gina McCrae. I am the Chief Executive Officer for the network, Black Integrated Communication Professionals. Here at AT&T, we're the oldest ERG, and for the company, I am a Senior Training Manager currently in Mesa, Arizona. Great to be here.
Thanks for coming. Next, I want to introduce a familiar face to many of you, George Cleveland. What you doing these days?
Hello, Tiffany. Thanks for having me. Excited to be back with Cricket Nation. I'm Senior Vice President of Customer Advocacy and Service Experience on the business side of AT&T Business. So lots been going on since I've seen you last. Great to be with you.
Well, thanks for coming today, and congratulations again on your promotion. We're all very excited for you.
Thank you.
Next, Naira Knight.
Hi, everyone. I'm Naira Knight. I'm the Senior Field Marketing Manager supporting the Southern California market with Cricket Wireless, and it's great to be here.
Great to have you. Sharon Mack.
Hi, everyone. Hi, awesome panelists, and Tiffany as well. Excited to be here. I'm Sharon Mack. I'm located in Atlanta, part of the Field Marketing Organization, and I'm a Senior Marketing Manager supporting Georgia, South Carolina, and headquarters. Glad to be here.
Thanks for coming. Jermaine Spite.
Thanks, Tiffany. Hello, everyone. I'm Jermaine Spite, Director of Communications, CSR, and Diversity for the Pre-K portfolio. Excited to be a part of the panel today.
We're excited to have you. And last but not least, John Grant from outside AT&T. Tell us about yourself.
Hi, Tiffany. Thanks for having me. Delighted to be here with everyone today. Again, my name is John Grant. I am the Executive Director of the Cricket MEAC SWAC Challenge, as well as the Cricket Celebration Bowl, and delighted to be here with you today.
Thanks for coming. So let's get to it. George, I'm going to ask you to start us off today. So let's talk about Black History Month. Can you tell us a little bit about how did Black History Month come to pass? What are the significance of the dates?
Absolutely. Glad to kick us off, Tiffany. This is a special opportunity for me because my family is kicking off this time as well. And this is an opportunity for us as we're educating our children on Black History Month. And it actually started as Black History Week or Negro History Week back in 1926 by a gentleman, a historian, Dr. Carter Goodwin Whitson. And his passion was making sure that the contributions of African Americans could be shared broadly across the country, because in the textbooks and in the history books, not a lot was being taught at that time about Black history. And his goal was to at least have a week where education could take place about the contributions of African Americans. And as you mentioned, that second week in February was especially significant because it represented the birthdays of two significant figures in African American history: Abraham Lincoln, whose birthday was on February 12th, and Frederick Douglass, whose birthday was on February 14th. And both of those folks were widely praised and celebrated within the Black community. And it was that opportunity to extend just history of African American contributions widely across the United States.
So you talked about how you're kicking off Black history discussion with your family. What's that look like? Can you share?
Absolutely. I mean, we've got 4 kids, so just to get them to sit down and to coalesce around a theme in itself is a challenge. But this is actually one of those topics where everybody's attention is held. So my wife and I, it'll be YouTube videos, it can be readings, it'll be poems. But it's that time, and we use early in the morning for us as that time, very short because the attention spans are short, but very short period of time in the morning to just pick a topic and just talk about it. And that's what we've done. And we kicked it off with the history of Black History Month. And then we've actually just gone person by person or event by event. And it's been interesting to see them take notes, and they do get quizzed on what they have learned for the week and get little rewards. So they are incented to pay attention. But it's actually something that they have, we're learning that they are actually learning a lot from and they are enjoying. So it's just our way to make sure that history from our perspective, my wife and I, is passed down to our kids.
Thank you for sharing that. So let's pivot to Naira. So Naira, we talked a little bit earlier. At what point in your life did you start talking about and really diving into Black history?
During grade school, it was mostly what was taught to us in the history books. It wasn't until my first semester in undergrad at Western Michigan University, I took an African American Studies class. And that's when it really was an eye-opening moment for me to really understand what I learned or what happened and, what the differences were in terms of what I was used to learning in the history books versus what really happened. And from then on, I took a couple more courses and really started to immerse myself in the Black history and our culture.
Was it the same for others on the phone, or a little bit different for anyone else want to chime in?
I think it was different, Tiffany. I'll chime in. We learned a lot growing up about Black history, speaking often about Black history, and really looking at and taking the time to understand how the contributions of African Americans really impacted our day to day. So my mother was a former state of Alabama Black History Quiz Bowl champion. So it was very much alive and thriving in our household, particularly with parents from the South. There was so much a part of Black history and the contributions of those that had come before them that needed to be talked about so that we could understand where we were today and that we stood on the shoulders of others. So we talked about it quite early and often.
Okay. So so what's your thought on this, Sharon? We've talked about this a little bit over time. Do you think Black history is something, it sounds like it's something you celebrate with your family, or do you view it more as a reason for corporations to celebrate Black history? So is it more family or corporate from your perspective?
Honestly, Tiffany, I think it's both. I think that, whether it's families, as George shared, talking about and sharing and quizzing one another to talk about the significance of a lot of the contributions, I think that there's definitely a part and a place for that because it's a constant reminder of our past, from whence we come. And it's a way for us to learn many times things that we did not know that were and are significant contributions of African Americans just in our day-to-day life. Peanut butter, the blood bank, things like that. But also, I think there's an important place for things like what we're doing today, to talk about it in corporate America, to make sure we communicate about it, because I think that it helps us to understand that this impacts us as employees, as well as our customer base as well. And I also think it continues to breathe life into the importance of diversity and inclusion and having varied voices at the table.
Okay, so I'm going to ask you to wind that back for a minute. So peanut butter and blood bank, explain.
Those were significant contributions from African Americans. So these are things that we may not think about and that, we may not know, but I think just in thinking about things that are happening every day that we think about. These are contributions. So I think those are the types of things that are important for us to know, share with youth, and to make sure that we're aware of as well.
Okay. Jermaine, is there anything you wanted to add?
Yeah, no, I think it should be taught across the board in more schools across the country. I grew up in Detroit, Michigan, where you had the '68 riots. And so, Black history was taught not only in schools, but in our household. If you look at Detroit, a lot of migration from the South to the North for jobs was critical. When you think of my grandparents being one of the first African-American couples to integrate into a neighborhood on the west side of Detroit and making strides there, which then led to white flight of, Caucasians moving out of the city of Detroit because the neighborhoods were becoming too integrated for them. And so you kind of grow up learning and experience diversity and then on some points racism as a kid, and you notice that early on. And the truth is that Black history is American history, and it needs to be taught because, as we grow and we get into corporate America and you have leaders in positions that maybe not have experienced diversity. I remember in college taking a course on diversity and culture, and a young lady in the class said she did not experience or see a Black person in person until she came to college because she grew up in rural northern Michigan. And so that's significant when you get into corporate America and you are put in positions of leadership and leading diverse teams, but not understanding the culture of those teams that you're leading.
That's a good point. So when we were preparing for this discussion, I had mentioned to some of you, not all, that growing up, there were things I remember in history. I learned about slavery, and I learned about Jim Crow, and I learned about, these certain basic things. And then with recent events, I learned about other things. So such as the Tuskegee experiment. And that was just me trying to figure out what was going on with history and concern over vaccines and the Tulsa Race Massacre. These are things that were not taught in my memory, and are things that I'm just now experiencing and learning about now. John Grant, when I was talking about that, you said something to me that I think is important for Black History Month. You said, Tiffany, you can, if you look at through any history, you can find a lot of negative stuff. You're calling out some negative things there. So with any history you talk about, you can find those things. We should really focus on the good. And so talk to us about the good, the things that you want folks that are listening today to take away about Black history.
Well, thank you, Tiffany. But I think you start with the triumph of the human spirit. I want you to imagine that, Blacks were brought to this country not by their own volition, but through slave ships, and brought into some of the most horrendous human conditions one can imagine. And for hundreds of years in America, endured those conditions in the form of slavery, through lynchings, through violent separations of family, but yet still they rose. And so when we look at history, I think Sharon mentioned a couple of things. If you think about just the number of things that we enjoy every day in our lives, the stoplight was invented by an African American. When you think of the refrigeration methods were in by African Americans. The ironing board, something as simple as when you think about, if you're a golfer, the golf tee that people use in African American, washing machines and were African American. The cell phone, the cellular technology that this company enjoys was invented by an African American. So the history of Black people in this country, and the ability to endure the things that people were subjected to, and yet still they rose to be an integral part of our nation. Those stories are inspiring. You mentioned in our discussion learning about the what we call Black Wall Street, the burning of the city in Oklahoma to the ground, where people were attacked simply for thriving, simply for creating a community and thriving, and yet still they rebuilt. Still, people managed to provide for families and still make contributions in spite of those conditions. So those are inspiring stories for me. Those are stories also that are part of history that is not taught. And so today, certainly with the advent of the internet and the ability to really do one's own sort of investigation and investigative learning, we have the capacity to learn so much more about the contributions that people have made throughout our existence in this country.
Well, you guys have given us lots of reasons to celebrate in the last few minutes. So a lot of eye-opening things. I think we need to put a timeline out there. That cell phone was a new one for me. I'm kind of embarrassed by that. So thank you for that. Okay, so I'm going to shift gears for a minute, and let's talk about HBCUs. So Cricket talks about our agreement with HBCUs, but I don't want to really talk about the ins and outs of a sponsorship agreement. I want to talk about the history of HBCU. And before we get started, did anyone know that it's HBCU week at AT&T? So Sharon and Naira, you got to take a picture of yourself and post it to Insider. So this is the week. You're wearing the right colors today to get that out there. So John, I want to direct this to you. Can you share some history about HBCUs and why they're significant today?
Yes, well, HBCU were founded, the first ones in Pennsylvania and in Ohio. And that was prior to the Civil War in the United States. They were founded to provide education opportunities for Blacks in the country at that time, because obviously they could not go to established universities. The original focus of their educational platforms was around teaching, training teachers and tradesmen to be able to apply their trades in the country, but also to educate others. From there, obviously, it spawned a network which today consists of over 103 universities around the country. The majority of them are primarily located here in the South, in the Southeast, as one would imagine. But those institutions have really provided an important opportunity to teach, train, and develop young people, many who went on to again do great things in our country. And so HBCUs provide a very important and critical and necessary contribution to our country, and we should be, all of us, proud of what they are doing and in every way possible supporting them.
So you went to North Carolina A&T, is that right?
Aggie born, Aggie bred. When I die, I am Aggie dead. As we say today, though, Aggie pride. I did, and I tell you, it was the best thing for me. I was the first one in my family to go to college. My parents did not attend college, and so they really couldn't talk to me about what college meant. But I had a Sunday school teacher, Mrs. Adams, and she would always, from the time we were kids, she would talk about something that certainly we didn't know, and that was going to college. And I chose North Carolina A&T from a brochure. The first day I set foot on the campus was the day my parents took me there, dropped me off, and just told me two things: do what we've always taught you, and stay out of trouble. And that was the advice they gave me. Gave me a few dollars from my pocket, and they drove away. But I want you to think about dropping your child off as parents do. Those developmental years are the most important years of a young person's life. That's when they're really learning to be on their own. But what happened for me at North Carolina A&T was I immediately became involved in a larger family. I remember meeting with my advisor the very first day, and my advisor very quickly connected me with several other people on campus after she realized that I was the first one to go to school. But she said, "Hey, I want you to meet this person, that person." She made phone calls, etc. And immediately, I had a network and of people that told me, "We are not going to let you fail here," and I believed them. And so, as a result, from there, we thrived. And I'm very appreciative of every one of them today, whom I can name them all. And I see, they were an essential part of my developmental life.
Okay. So I'm going to pivot now to George Cleveland. You went to Morehouse. Tell me about the preparation to be a Morehouse man.
Affectionately called The House. Couldn't resist. Now, as John mentioned, the experience, Tiffany, was unlike anything I had ever experienced. And just to give you perspective, being born in Macon, Georgia, Pleasant Hill, Black community, attending a Catholic school within the Black community, then going to high school, which was predominantly white, for me, going to Morehouse was like, wow, this is a lot different than high school. And as John mentioned, in not different in a bad way or a good way, it was just, wow, I had never seen professors who looked like me. I had never seen leaders who had come through this type of institution. I'll just go down the list. Out of Morehouse, Martin Luther King, Maynard Jackson, Samuel Jackson, Spike Lee, John David Washington, Denzel's son, Jay Johnson, Julian Bond. I mean, just a list of people who are just household names. And it was so humbling to have the opportunity to come from a small town like Macon, get to the big city of Atlanta. And, similar to John, my parents dropped me off and it was like, listen, this is a very expensive school. Do your best and just make us proud. And, I think just that weight of understanding the responsibility that came along with being at an institution like Morehouse was just very humbling and really just made me want to contribute and to do my best and to live up to the expectations of those who had really paved the way for me to go there. And I'll just say real quickly, I had a godfather, Bertram Hooper, and every time he came over to our house, he always talked about his Morehouse experience. He was there during the time of King and civil rights activists in his own rights. And, when you're that young, you don't really have any context. Like, why is he always talking about Morehouse? But once you go through that experience and you really begin to see the network and just the connections that are made there, and I still have them to this day, I can see why he loved it so much, and it really was a very special experience. And just thankful for the opportunity to have gotten through there and gotten out as well.
Okay, so Sharon, you went to Clark, and I often hear folks refer to the Atlanta University Center Consortium. Can you explain what that is and what that experience was for you?
Yes, yes, absolutely. I share the same thought and sentiment as George and John. Absolutely loved my experience at Clark, or as we call it, CAU. Just a bit of background, the Atlanta University Center is the oldest and largest consortium of African American institutions of higher learning. Right now, the consortium consists of 4 schools: Morehouse, Spelman, Morehouse Medical, and Clark Atlanta, my beloved as well. As you said, yes, I am a graduate of their MBA program. I think that, and for anyone that doesn't know, this complex sits in historic Southwest Atlanta in the historic West End. The great thing is these schools are steeped in rich tradition individually, but in 1929, they came together to build and really start this consortium so that the students would have the opportunity to embark upon dual degrees, cross-register into different programs, study together, and utilize different resources amongst the different campuses. So it really made their students stronger, their talent stronger, and it really just, it feels like the experience of getting a hug of life. I think the people that you encounter, the networking, the confidence, and just the entire experience is like none other. So I think until you experience it, until you're there on the campus, until you understand the rich tradition, history, come back for a homecoming or the combined homecomings that happen sometimes, you really may not understand how great it feels, how good an experience it is, and what an impact it is and has on your life. And I have not regretted that at all.
We still have a lot to unpack with our panel of guests. Look out for part 2 of this conversation, which will be available next week. Also, for more discussions like this one, look out for details on the Diversity Summit coming March 30th. Thanks again for watching, and we'll see you next time